This is a very important video topic because it addresses the monopoly that the left claims to have over people that are in poverty, people that are disenfranchised. I think that it has become obvious in the last few years that the left actually is not on the side of anyone, even the people that it claims to give counterfeit virtue, because it actually just destroys their lives, makes them anxious, miserable, hating people that go around life looking for ways to be resentful of coherent systems and then to derive counterfeit victimhood and oppression from those things. But this conservative girl says she wants to be a social worker, and she says that most social workers are on the left because there's an idea in social work that being poor is like a disease that you're born with, rather than a condition you can transcend. And that's a very left-wing set of presuppositions, because it says that there is no such thing as an individual, and that because there's no such thing as an individual, you can't take accountability for yourself and affect your own life, and you can't plan coherently because coherence doesn't exist, and when you try to suggest that it exists, that's merely in a form of oppression and patriarchy and corruption, and to engage in the systems that would better yourself to lift yourself up, aka capitalism, which, by the way, has done more to lift people out of poverty and make them wealthy globally than even the most optimistic projections expected. It says that to engage in capitalism is basically to switch sides, to play the other side of the chessboard, which of course we know, according to the left, is reprehensible and makes you a bad person. I'm guessing you're going to see examples of this tomorrow when I go out and interview people in Santa Monica, asking them about why they're on the left. There's a tremendous amount of narcissism where people believe that there is no virtue outside of the left because all victims must identify with the notion of rejecting their individual identity.
You can think that would conflict, obviously. Leaning a little bit more Republican, and I put it. However, I have found that I'm leaning a little bit more Republican, and I feel like I come at a standstill with that. And I really just want to get your advice moving forward for myself. There's some obvious things I think you can think that would conflict, obviously. I guess that's kind of my question. What advice do you have for me as a Republican aspiring social worker?
What would conflict?
I don't know, like, how to say it properly.
I think I can help. The social work industry is very much about a perspective generally of that people in poverty are there permanently and not trying to break people out of poverty into the middle class or higher levels.
Right.
And that's why the Democrat Party and social work are very intertwined.
Right. The focus is on the children in underprivileged communities, because I personally feel like they don't choose to be put in that position. But I'm having a little bit of a difficult time empathizing with the older generation of underprivileged, and not in every community, but I don't know how to, I don't know.
And even though that's the exception, that is actually the only possible reaction when you're thinking with any degree of coherence about what you're witnessing. When you spend time around old people that are poor, that believe the reason they're poor is because they're victims, old people, not young teenage girls who think that they're victimized as they go to Starbucks and buy lattes, like 60-year-old women and men that think that they're being oppressed in the most free and prosperous country in the history of the planet. In some ways, that position is so definitionally perverse, you couldn't find a more perverse outlook because it's just so untrue. I mean, if you were a serf in the year 700, you would be way more correct about not being able to better your station in life because you're ruled over by kings and tyrants. But still, I would say, even in that situation, you wouldn't want to have a mental model of victimhood because you would be miserable all the time. And the small amounts of things you could do to improve your life, you wouldn't be able to even approach conceptually. But here and now, when 78% of millionaires did not inherit their wealth, when 89% of billionaires did not inherit their wealth, in the country with the most amount of economic mobility that the world has ever seen, combined with the country with the most amount of freedom and liberty enshrined in its founding, there is no excuse at all. And so the development of compassion, which is really what is at the crux of the good-intentioned leftists and most women, because most women are on the left, the reason they're on the left is because they're compassionate. Having compassion for people is going to have to broaden and take into account the fact that people make bad decisions and that they tell themselves objectively wrong stories, not partially wrong stories or flawed stories. The stories they tell themselves are utterly wrong, and they're actually designed by the worst set of ideas to ever exist, called Marxism, the ideology which commands victimhood and proclaims that to be a victim means that you're a good person. You can see that if this was accepted, if these premises were accepted, a person would strive to be a victim so that they can claim to be a good person, rather than transcending their own environment. And this is the reason why people on the left are constantly resentful and people on the right are struggling to better themselves and succeeding. And so in some sense, if compassion is to be salvaged, it will have to come from this understanding.
Like, how to not sound bad I know you are great at not sounding bad when you say stuff, but I don't want to say something that...
Not according to a lot of leftists who consider any ideas that go against their cult to be reprehensible and a threat to democracy.
will get me in trouble.
Well, here's one way to look at it. And Charlie, that was helpful, actually. The Great Society from Lyndon Johnson. It was a series of policies that were designed to help underprivileged communities.
Right.
They hurt the very people they were supposed to help.
How?
Well, the reality is it created dependence on government. So you have a lot of single mothers, for example, that are paid more
Yes.
money not to have a man in the house
This is very important, and this applies to the black community especially.
than to have a man in the house because of the way the math of these aid
And dudes, you know, I see you in the comments from my previous video about the popping the balloons. Let me know what you think about this.
programs
What do you
work.
mean?
Well, often the way the math of the aid is calculated is if you have an earning husband in the household, that actually causes you to disqualify for forms of federal aid
Right.
that were designed to help you.
Right.
But actually, the best way to get kids in your own household ahead is in a two-parent household.
And the data on that is crystal clear, so just quickly on a factual level, if you have two parents in the household, you're less likely to go to jail, do drugs, drop out of high school, remain poor your entire life, and also have children out of wedlock. So having two parents in the household is, from a data perspective, enormously important. But the government, if you catch what he just said, incentivizes women to remain single by the government paying them as a result of not being married, because it rewards, there it is again, victimhood, because the women are what? Victims as a result of being single. Oh, the man left. She's not with a guy. So therefore she's a victim. No consideration given to maybe she had terrible behavior and that's the reason why the guy left. Maybe she was a bad wife or a bad girlfriend and that's why the guy left. Maybe she wasn't submissive, feminine. Oh, I wonder if that could be the case in that certain community. And I think you could concretely conclude from excerpts of Delusion from that dating show that so many of the black women you see go on there are completely disconnected from reality, utterly insane and delusional, as well as narcissistic, that it would make sense that the way that they got there is through decades of this being passed down and practiced intergenerationally. Because as Vivek just said, this has been going on for decades, since Lyndon B. Johnson. And by the way, the only way you get women that are hating men at the age of 14 is through intergenerational resentment. Mothers that are thoroughly cognitively destroyed and blame men and society for all their problems and resent masculinity and coherence, etc. A video is going to be coming out soon on that too, but this is very interesting.
And you can let them know, because I believe this is genuinely true. Not just the Republican Party, but our conservative movement. We care about lifting people up from poverty. We just care about actually doing it rather than talking about it.
Exactly. Objectively doing it. So again, we see the disconnection between the objective world and the world based on resentment and lies and the groupthink cult of the left, which requires dogmatic adherence.
And
what I would say.
the other thing I'll say is that we as conservatives believe that if you're in poverty, it's largely because of values, not because of lack of stuff.
Yes, values is the bedrock of it, because first there's decisions, but decisions are merely manifestations of values. And then values, if you take that a layer deeper, or several layers deeper, you get to religious presuppositions.
Like what values?
Not saving money, spending all of your money in your paycheck as you get it, for example. Abandoning your spouse after impregnating you. Not spending
Robbing stores.
all of your money on alcohol and drugs and instead opening a 401k. So values are the number one predictor of entering the middle class. And there's a great book called Life at the Bottom. You should read it, by Theodore Dalrymple, who's a social worker in the United Kingdom. It's called Life at the Bottom, where he got into social work because he wanted to help people, and he realized it was not a lack of stuff. It wasn't lack of housing, lack of...
Right. People telling themselves wrong, incoherent stories. So it makes sense that the left preys on people that are telling themselves wrong, incoherent stories, just as it preys on women with fragmented, degenerate psyches that have been practiced in denying reality over and over again. There are many 16-year-old girls now that are taught to hate men, that are taught out of nowhere for no reason, that society is corrupt, as they're drinking an $8, latte on a MacBook that costs $1,200. But see, the fact that that doesn't make sense and is incoherent is no concern to them. They're just free votes for the left.
food stamps. It was that their value system was one that kept them poor. So yeah, really quick, then I want to get to the next question.
I'm just struggling because in all of my social work classes right now, they're talking about all of those things. And
They're wrong.
So what do? I'm trying to learn about what I want.
Right, their ideas, their presuppositions are based in Marxism, based in the idea that people must have victimhood because, again, there's no other way of being a good person as far as they're concerned. Virtue is determined by your group identity and by your victimhood status. So they're essentially just trying to find new ways that they can pretend the poor people are oppressed so that they can be good people, even though they haven't done anything to earn being good people. And when I say good, I'm not talking about their soul, I'm talking about their merit. But in that ignoring of anything that is not victimhood status and group identity is actually what could better their lives, which is why the left keeps people miserable and suffering. Just like the drug companies, if you cure someone of a sickness, they no longer become a customer. If you make someone's life better, they no longer remain a leftist. Because the more you can get someone to believe that they're a victim, and the more you tell them that they're a good person as a result of being a victim, then you create an inverse incentive structure to prevent them from bettering their lives and accepting presuppositions which would result in the rejection of the Marxist left-wing ideology.
Want to do.
I think you need to stay in social work because you're called to do it, but there's an amazing amount of literature from Thomas Sowell to Shelby Steele to Theodore Dalrymple that get down to actual root causes of poverty, which is not lack of stuff, but is worldview. And I think that'd be super helpful.
Thank you so much.
God bless you.
Trump 2024.
Yes, you want a hat? Thank you. Yes, great. Thank you.
Your sperm don't make you male.
Then what does?